we have to fear is
in war, there is no substitute for victory.
Let us never negotiate out of fear.
We stand undivided, forever united, fighting hand in hand for the liberty we've earned, for glory and honor, for our sons and daughters, ever mindful of the lessons we've learned. Let the torch of freedom burn.
Welcome to WallBuilders Live. This is the intersection of faith and politics. Thank you for joining us today. Visit us online at wallbuilders.com and wallbuilderslive.com. There at our WallBuilders Live radio site, you can get a list of all of our stations around the country we can be heard on. And also you can find out about some of our past programs. We have archive sections there with lots of programs from the last few months, including our Good News Fridays, our Foundations of Freedom Thursday. You might want to get involved in some of those talks about the Constitution and the Declaration and our founding principles. And maybe you have some questions you would like us to cover on those Foundations of Freedom Thursdays. You can get those questions answered by sending in your question to radio@wallbuilders.com, and hopefully we'll be able to answer that. Maybe it's about a founding father or about some of the principles that the nation was founded upon, or it could be about some of the things happening right now in our nation and how the founders might have responded to that. Almost every issue we face today, in principle, they faced in one way, shape, or form, and it's great to be able to go back to that history and look at how they responded to those things. So today we are finishing up a three-part series with a guy named George Barna. If you're not familiar with Mr. Barna, you ought to check out his website, barna.org. That's BARNA.org. Phenomenal researcher, wealth of information there on his website. This is the third part in a three-part series. So yesterday and the day before, we heard from George Barna. He was speaking at the Pro-Family Legislators Conference. That's that chance once a year for us to get together with state reps and senators from around the nation and just exchange ideas and hear from some great speakers, George Barna being one of those. And he shared incredible information, some of it shocking, some of it very concerning in terms of the culture and where the young people are right now and the thinking of our current generation even, of just a lack of biblical worldview. And he talked about some of the things that we need to do to turn that around. So it's a great presentation. We wanted to share it with you, our listeners, here on WallBuilders Live. If you missed those first two parts in this series, you can get them on our website right now at wallbuilderslive.com. And after today, you can take all three parts and share them with your friends and family. It's great information. I hope that you'll share it with the folks in your life. Let's go back to the Pro-Family Legislators Conference. We're going to get the conclusion of the presentation from George Barna.
What we have are all kinds of divisions between the generations, having to do with dreams for the future, having to do with marriage and divorce and entertainment, the role of the media, expectations about the media, things related to relationships, even our issue agenda, which we'll get to in a moment. See, but the truth is that when reality exceeds our expectations, we're really happy. But when reality falls short, we become unhappy, maybe depressed or even angry. And frankly, reality these days cannot possibly match the dreams of our two younger generations. And so as they emerge as the new leaders in our society, that changes the whole process. That changes our entire set of expectations as a culture. And particularly in leadership circles, which you run in, it changes the game there as well. See, part of the disappointment also stems from the fact that the central social institutions that facilitated the American dream are no longer respected. If you look at the trend lines over the last 40 years in terms of our trust and our confidence in those institutions, what you see is that pretty consistently we've been losing respect for, we've been losing trust and confidence in those institutions. And so if you were to take some of the leading institutions, you see a tremendous imbalance in terms of those which have actually gotten better in terms of their trust levels and those that have declined. See, institutions now are seen as part of the problem, not part of the solution. And that's because more and more people simply look at them and they say, well, those institutions represent authority, centralized authority. We don't like that. They represent control. They represent inefficiency. See, the new mindset is, yes, we will accept institutions, but only in so much as they provide personal benefits with efficiency, with convenience, and without dominating my life at all. They're looking for something very different. And so armed with this whole new set of values and a radically redefined worldview and even a novel arsenal of common behaviors, Americans have not only abandoned many of the social institutions that made the country great, but we've adopted a new national political agenda. And if you were to compare the agenda from 10 years ago to the agenda today, you'd see a pretty substantial shift in what it is that we now have to pay attention to. That redefines our conversations, where we put our energy and our efforts, the kinds of research that we do, the conversations that we have. Seeing the substitution of this new issue agenda for the old goes beyond simple issue fatigue. There becomes a point at which people just get tired of talking about a certain issue. And in some ways, that's kind of what we've had take place with abortion. People just got tired of it. They wanted to move on. But with many of these other issues, that's not what's going on. This has to do with a redefinition of what it means to be American, what it means to have a viable lifestyle, and what really matters in people's minds and hearts. See, the new agenda, if you look at that, it's much less about traditional morality. It's much more about things like individual freedom and choice and personal expression, because those are the things that people in America are worried about today. The new agenda reflects the mindset that America is no longer king of the world, and we're not particularly interested in regaining that place in the world. The emphasis now is on sustainability. See, if the old agenda reflected things such as security and prosperity and independence and optimism, the new agenda actually reflects things such as fear, uncertainty, interdependence, the embrace of change, and a shift away from loyalty and trust of people and institutions. A completely different way of understanding the playing field. Now, in turn, all of these things together has helped us to even reimagine who we are as Americans. We do this study, every few years, and trying to figure out what is the self-image that Americans have. And what we discovered is that right now, the ranking of how we view ourselves, we see ourselves as playing many different roles in life. It's a combination of types that are interdependent. But we see ourselves first and foremost as an individual, secondly as a sharp consumer, someone who knows a deal, someone who knows how to manage their resources, thirdly as a parent or perhaps a spouse or a family person, fourthly we view ourselves as someone in the working world, a career person, fifthly an American citizen, sixthly a Christian. Even though currently 79 to 81%, depending on what time of year we do the survey, 79 to 81% of Americans describe themselves as Christian.
Red, White, Blue, and Green is a new reality show following the Green family around the nation, rediscovering the American principles that made us the most successful nation in the history of the world. You can be a part of launching this new reality series by visiting rickgreen.com and clicking on the Red, White, Blue, and Green tab. Here's a sneak peek from the pilot episode. Rick Green coming to you live from the Lone Star State of Texas, a beacon of hope and freedom to liberty lovers around the world. Today I'm thinking about why do we do what we do? Because everywhere we go as a family, when we're traveling and speaking, someone comes up to us and asks, where's the hope? Is it over for America? They genuinely feel like the stars and stripes are fading. I felt that. But when I look at my family, whether it's my son Trey and his drive to exceed expectations, or Reagan and his love for serving and teaching other people, Cameron and her determination to outperform her brothers in everything she does, or my little stagehound Rhett and his boundless enthusiasm, through their eyes, I see a vibrant nation. When my children stand in the birthplace of the Constitution, or on battlefields where patriots gave their lives, I can see in them a rekindled flame of the American spirit. The future of my children's country is bright because it's built on the foundation of an incredible providential history. A history of patriots and pastors, entrepreneurs and freedom fighters, mothers, fathers, families like yours and mine, who chose to live like their nation depended on it. And it still does. So when people ask us, where is the hope? We tell them, it's in you. Each of us, every individual, every family, has a duty to fight for freedom and add our voice, our color, to the American dream. For our family, it's red, white, and blue, and a little bit of green. To learn more about red, white, blue, and green, visit rickgreen.com.
Let the torch of freedom burn.
And you've got just under 4 out of 10 who might be considered to be born again, based not on them calling themselves that, but on what they believe theologically. And so that's kind of a frightening reality too. See, but that in turn helps to explain why the dominant moral structure in America is no longer reflective of traditional Christian or biblical morality. I'm not going to make that, by the way. I'm just warning you now. What do we know? We know, first of all, that morality is in flux. Why? Because there are no moral absolutes that are recognized by the vast majority of the American public. They bought into this existentialist or postmodern idea that I am the only person who knows what's true and right for me. Nobody else can tell me that. You can pass all the laws you want, but it has nothing to do with me, because I'm the arbiter of rightness in my life. We believe that the Bible offers some good options, but they are not absolutes. We know that morality in our country is very volatile, which is shocking if you think about it, because morality should be based upon our values and our worldview, and our values and our worldview should pretty much be set in stone. They are what they are if they reflect truth. But now that we reside in a nation where truth is not recognized, when we don't even believe there is such a thing as truth, when most Christians, most born again, and in fact most evangelical Christians, we distinguish those two groups in our research. We can talk about that later if you want. But even most of those people do not believe there is such a thing as absolute moral truth. That's why morality becomes so volatile. Why would people's opinions on abortion change? There's no new information about it. It's either murder or it isn't. I mean, those are your two choices. And so, yeah, maybe we've got better videos, sharper definition on those today than we had 10 years ago. But frankly, it's all the same stuff. How can people's perceptions, how can their positions change? Well, because lacking any kind of an anchor in terms of your worldview or your values, you are susceptible to the last best argument that you heard. And so if somebody gives you an astounding presentation that's pro-choice, you may as well become pro-choice. But then the next day, somebody comes along and gives you an even better presentation that's pro-life. Suddenly you're pro-life. And so you're vacillating back and forth based on the last best thing that you heard. That's what we've got going on here. We can look at the fact that morality now is determined on the fly. See, it's no longer a given in anybody's life. We make it up day to day as we go along because of that lack of an anchor. And so now what we do is we have this unique personal blend of spiritual beliefs and sensitivity, of emotional impact and empirical data, and we blend them together and we try to come up with some kind of a meaningful position that we feel we can defend that day. See, and what that's done is it's made moral decisions both very personal and unique. There are very few shared moral views across the country that people hold with any real depth, any determination. I mean, if you think about it, what are the agreed upon moral sins in America today? There aren't very many. You've got rape, you've got child abuse, but I mean, even things like murder and, theft, there's all kinds of arguments about why those are justified. And you've got tens of millions of people who buy into those arguments. You've got an entire profession known as the legal profession that makes a grand living by distorting truth. And so, without any kind of an anchor, you can get away with that. See, and what happens in that kind of a society is anyone who possesses unambiguous moral standards that impose behavioral limits on anybody, well, more often than not, they're labeled judgmental and intolerant. On the other hand, anybody who has unambiguous moral stands that preclude any kind of behavioral limits, they're described as enlightened and loving and merciful.
This is David Barton with another moment from America's history. How should we respond if confronted with frustration and conflict? The proper response was given over 200 years ago in a lengthy speech when Benjamin Franklin told the delegates at the Constitutional Convention, "In this situation of this assembly, groping as it were in the dark to find political truth, how has it happened, sir, that we have not hitherto once thought of humbly applying to the Father of lights to illuminate our understanding? Have we now forgotten that powerful friend? Or do we imagine we no longer need His assistance? God governs in the affairs of men. I therefore move that henceforth prayers imploring the assistance of heaven and its blessings on our deliberations be held in this assembly every morning before we proceed to business." Benjamin Franklin knew that prayer was the proper response.
For more information on God's hand in American history, contact WallBuilders at 1-800-8-REBUILD.
Let the torch of freedom burn.
How did that happen? I would posit for your consideration that the dominance influence agents of the New World are no longer parents or pastors or elected officials. I'd suggest to you that it's the new media superstars, it's sports and entertainment celebrities, and personal friends. It's not a personal opinion, that comes out of our research. If we have time later and you want to see it, I'll show you some of that research. But frankly, what we know is that in an era of independence and control, Americans resist any kind of broad and restrictive codes of morality. Let me tell you what I think some of this means. First of all, no single person or policy got us into this mess, nor will any single person or policy get us out of it. We have got to begin to work together as a community to get things done, to represent God's ways as best we can. Collaboration is an important thing. And that means that we've got to identify who our allies in the fight are. Now, one of the things that I would offer up to you to think about is the possibility of working with churches. Now, before you say, "Oh, gee, I tried that, forget about it," I get it. I've been working with churches for 30 years. I got the scars to prove it. They don't play well in any sandbox, okay? But I work with this group, the American Culture and Faith Institute. Our goal is to try to get churches to get more actively involved in the political arena, going back to what the church was in the early days of the Republic, representing God's views, teaching God's people about what is our responsibility related to these issues and whatnot. And so we just finished a conference last week looking at, I did some research related to that. One of the things I want to tell you is that as we interviewed theologically conservative pastors in churches around the country, and this is what I do with the group, I do research for the group and we put these things out. You can get all this stuff free online at our website. But what we know is that pastors, theologically conservative pastors, by and large, get it in terms of the Bible having principles about all of the issues of the day. They know that, they believe that, they buy that, they would tell people that. Now, the problem is they're not willing to preach about it. And there are a number of reasons for that, which I wish we had more time to go into, but the essence of it is this. They were trained in seminaries that told them, you do not belong in politics. They've had no teaching, they've had no education, they've had no modeling, they've had no encouragement, they've had no reinforcement for anything they have ever done in the political arena. In fact, the media takes them on and helps them to believe that they are doing something that is unbiblical, that is un-American, and that is inappropriate. Now, I would suggest to you that part of the role you can play is to help educate and encourage and reinforce pastors getting in the game. But we know that they recognize that, for instance, I asked them about the last election, and they said, we know we played almost no role in the 2012 election. We have very little influence. But a majority of theologically conservative pastors said, you know, if somebody would help me, I want to be more involved. I need some tools. I need some ammunition. Somebody else talked about earlier today. I think it was the rabbi. You know, so yes, there are ways to get them involved we can talk about later on. I suggest to you, secondly, that you have to understand that conservative positions on most of the critical issues of the day are currently at odds with public sentiment. That is a major problem if you seek to develop legislation based upon the polls. It's not a problem if you simply recognize that the purpose of polls is to help you understand that's where we are and that Americans need to be re-educated. And that maybe some of your colleagues in the legislature and in the governor's office and elsewhere need to be re-educated. See, because your job is not to be led by the people. They elected you to lead them. And so you have to understand these dynamics. Use the polls as a tool. Understand as well that one of the sad things that I observe, this is not based on research now, this is a personal observation, but one of the things that I observe is that what we typically do is we keep repeating our arguments over and over and over again. And you all know the definition of insanity, right? Doing the same thing over and over and expecting different results. We are insane. See, because we don't understand that people only change when they feel pain, when they feel fear, when they trust somebody who's trying to lead them, or when they recognize some kind of a personal benefit that they're going to get out of the change that's being proposed. Our messages need to deal with those kinds of motivations. Remember I said earlier, what does a leader do? We motivate, mobilize, resource people to pursue a shared vision. First thing on that list, we motivate. Okay, we've got to get them excited about how we see things, which means we're going to need to re-communicate them. Thirdly, forgive me for going quickly, but time is what it is. Keep in mind, as I'm sure you've heard over and over, various times in your career, that politics is the art of compromise. Compromise is seen as a dirty word in conservative circles. And the reality of the process is, no, we can never compromise our principles. I would never suggest that. I would never applaud that. If your principles are God's principles, you stick with them, no matter what happens.
Hey, this is Tim Barton with WallBuilders. And as you've had the opportunity to listen to WallBuilders Live, you've probably heard the wealth of information about our nation, about our spiritual heritage, about the religious liberties, about all the things that makes America exceptional. And you might be thinking, as incredible as this information is, I wish there was a way that I could get one of the WallBuilders guys to come to my area and share with my group, whether it be a church, whether it be a Christian school or public school or some political event or activity. If you're interested in having a WallBuilder speaker come to your area, you can get on our website at www.wallbuilders.com, and there's a tab for scheduling. And if you'll click on that tab, you'll notice there's a list of information from speakers' bios to events that are already going on, and there's a section where you can request an event to bring this information about who we are, where we came from, our religious liberties and freedoms. Go to the WallBuilders website and bring a speaker to your area.
Let the torch of freedom burn.
If it runs you out of office, praise God that you stood firm for Him in the midst of that kind of confrontation. But understand that in the political realm, there are going to be times when we may not get everything we want. You see, and unfortunately, I hear so many conservatives who make every issue an all or nothing contest. And the reality is, I've been trying to show you in our culture today, is that right now we're in a position where we'll probably get nothing, if that's how we want to play the game. We're going to have to be willing to maybe settle for some less than ideal interim outcomes, making incremental progress toward the ultimate goal. Recognizing that, you know what, the game doesn't end today. We are in this for the long haul. You've got to have that long-term vision. Vision never gets accomplished quickly. If you have something that gets accomplished quickly, it's probably a goal. It's not vision. One of the things that I did a couple of books years ago on vision, studied leaders of all different realms. One of the things that I learned is that when they get God's vision, it outlives the visionary. So you may go to your grave not yet having seen God's vision that He invested in your mind and heart being completely fulfilled. That's okay. Because you should be raising up people who are going to come in behind you, who are going to continue to pursue that vision. Vitally important function of what you do. Final words for you. Just keep in mind, God never called you to be successful. He only called you to be obedient. You do not control the process, therefore you cannot determine the results. All you can do is be obedient to what he called you to do, who he called you to be, and to live according to the principles that he's given to you. If every legislator that we had in America did that, we would have a very different country. And I pray to God that you'll be one of those people. Thank you so much, and God bless you.
Well, thank you to George Barna for speaking at the Pro-Family Legislators Conference. Thank you for listening today. I hope that you've learned as much as we did. That was just so much good information there. And some of it may have really bothered you. You may be as concerned as we are, but I hope that it motivates you to get involved and make a difference, to do more to preserve this way of life that we love. It's going to take all of us getting involved. It's going to take us thinking generationally, thinking about our children and grandchildren, thinking about how to influence our current generation and the future generations, and how to do these things wisely. It doesn't happen by accident, folks. We've got to have some good strategy, and that's why George Barna, is just great to have him as a friend of this show and to the Pro-Family Legislators Conference, and we appreciate him speaking at the conference, helping to equip and encourage and educate those legislators, but also for us being able to air this here on WallBuilders Live and do the same for you, our listeners. And we want to encourage you to visit his website at barna.org, barna.org. Barna.org. We'll have a link today at wallbuilderslive.com to make it easy for you. We appreciate you listening. You've been listening to WallBuilders Live with David Barton and Rick Green.
We stand undivided.